An 80-year-old man was shoved to the ground in broad daylight. No one stepped in. No one said a word. Only a phone, recording it like it was some kind of joke. They didn't know he was a veteran. A man who once risked his life on the battlefield so they could laugh on the sidewalk today. And what they also didn't know, an hour later, that very park would be surrounded by men in black. No insignias, no need for introductions. This isn't just a story. It's one of the many veteran stories we tell. For one reason only: justice for veterans. It all began with a fall. Frank Shepard lived alone in a small wooden house on the town's edge. Each morning, he drove his old pickup to the same gas station. The young attendant there called him Mr. Frank. Slow, gentle, always paid in cash. He often sat on the wooden bench out front, paper coffee cup in hand, eyes gazing far away. No one knew where he'd been, what he'd done, only that he didn't talk much, and always smiled when someone greeted him. Every step he took was heavy, his back slightly hunched, but his eyes, they never wavered. That morning was no different. Until Frank saw a group of bikers block a young woman on the night shift, he set his coffee down and stood up. 3 motorcycles thundered to a stop in front of the gas station. The bikers' loud laughter shattered the early morning stillness. The young woman, early 20s, was surrounded by crude, mocking voices. One of them, Ty Knox, the leader, grabbed her name tag. "Oh, your name's Claire? You better take good care of us then." Frank Shepard stepped forward. Not fast, not loud, just close enough to be noticed. He spoke quietly, but clearly. "She's working. She's not your toy." Ty turned, sneering. "Old man, you trying to be a hero?" Frank said nothing, just held his gaze, unshaken. And in that moment, the air started to shift. Ty stepped closer, eye to eye. "Move along, old man." Frank didn't budge. Another biker shoved him by the shoulder. The first time, Frank staggered back. The second, a hard push. Frank hit the cold concrete. His head struck the edge of the fuel island. A sharp, dry thud echoed. Laughter stopped for a second, then erupted louder. Blood trickled from his forehead. Frank tried to sit up, hands trembling, but not a soul came forward. A man in a suit nearby quietly turned away. A middle-aged couple pulled their child and walked off. Only one teenager remained, recording. Not helping, not speaking, just filming. Frank looked straight into the camera. Not angry, not pleading. Just a gaze that seemed to ask, "How long will you all just watch?" Frank said nothing. He stood, wiped the blood with a worn shirt sleeve. His limp was heavier, his back more bent. The pickup truck still sat there, but he didn't drive home. He crossed the street to the park, to an old wooden bench where he'd read the paper every Saturday. He sat down, hands trembling as he opened his wallet. Among yellowed photos was a worn card. Faded text. "Whiskey team. Emergency protocol only." And a number. Frank stared at it for a long time. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed. No hesitation, no fear. That call wasn't to complain. It was to awaken something. As the line rang, Frank closed his eyes. Memories surged back. A jungle in Southeast Asia. 1971. Gunfire. The sting of gunpowder and wet soil. Frank Young, eyes burning, bridled a squad through a mountain pass. A landmine exploded nearby. 3 men went down. Frank rushed in, cradling a bleeding soldier, firing back, screaming, "Fall back! I'll cover!" 14 survived that day. Because of him. At the park, Frank still held the phone. His hand trembled, but his voice was steady. "This is Shepard. Code Echo Zulu 5. Requesting whiskey team." The reply from the other end: received. An encrypted message was sent. In a loft in Texas, a man repairing a radio froze mid-turn. In Florida, a former medic dropped his lunch, eyes lighting up. At a garage in Colorado, a burly black mechanic tossed a wrench aside, opened a locker labeled, "Team Whiskey, never retired." 6 men, 6 histories, One call, all over 60. But their pace rivaled the young. Black SUVs with no plates departed from 3 states. A small tag on each windshield. QRT, Quick Recall Team. They didn't ask why, they only needed to know, Frank called. And that was enough. The park remained quiet. Frank sat still on the wooden bench, gaze fixed in the distance. He had wrapped the wound on his forehead with an old handkerchief. Then came the sound of engines. Not like the bikers loud and boastful, but low, steady, like war drums. 3 black SUVs crawled into the parking lot. Doors opened almost simultaneously. 6 men stepped out. Each wore a jacket bearing a patch, an eagle's head, embracing the letter W. One of them, Colonel Walter Briggs, approached and nodded at Frank. He said nothing. He didn't have to. A single look into Frank's eyes told them all they needed. They weren't here for revenge. They were here for duty. Evening crept in. The park stayed mostly empty, but the air grew heavy. Then the roar of an engine tore through the calm. The bikers had returned. Tynox led the pack, dark shades, leather jacket, wearing defiance on his face. "Where's that old man?" he bellowed, flicking his cigarette to the ground. Claire, the gas station clerk, stood in the distance, gripping her phone, trembling. The teen with the camera was back tooth, this time, live streaming. Ty strode right into the park. Frank remained seated on the bench. Behind him, the 6 stood silent as statues. Ty sneered. "What is this? Some kind of senior citizen security squad?" Colonel Briggs stepped forward. "No, we're the men he saved. From hell 50 years ago." Tynox paused, scoffed. "I shoved an old man, and now I get a SWAT team?" Colonel Briggs didn't laugh. He reached into his coat and pulled out a faded silver badge, the insignia of the Whiskey Special Forces unit. "You touched a man that these fiv owe our lives to. Frank Shepard, Medal of Honor recipient, 1,972. Gasps rippled through the small crowd. Someone live streaming whispered, "Wait, what? That old man's a special ops vet." Frank remained still, eyes closed. Not proud, not angry. Ty lowered his sunglasses. For a brief moment, confusion flickered. Then Colonel Briggs continued, "You just did what I never dared to do. You struck the man I call hero." The air froze. The bikers fell silent. Then, one of them stepped forward, a wiry young man with brown hair named Jesse Ray. His voice trembled, but it was honest. "My grandfather served in Vietnam too. I didn't know who Frank was, but if he saved lives, like my granddad." Jesse turned to Ty. "We were wrong." Ty stood motionless. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. "Colonel," Briggs stepped forward, placed a hand on Jesse's shoulder. "You still have time to do the right thing, and it starts with the truth." Frank opened his eyes, looked at Jesse, and gave a slow nod. For the first time that day, he smiled. The next morning, a plain envelope lay at Frank's doorstep. Inside was the original Medal of Honor stolen in 1989, now returned. At the same time, word spread throughout the town. News crews arrived. The mayor called, requesting to meet Frank. 3 local mechanics offered to restore Frank's old pickup free of charge. Claire knitted a new beanie and handed it to him, shyly. And in the park, a small sign was quietly erected. "You were never forgotten. Thank you for not giving up." Frank stood before it, said nothing, but his hand closed tightly around the metal, as if gripping something long lost that had finally returned. At the small town chapel, where a tribute was held, every pew was filled. Frank stood before the simple wooden podium. He brought no papers, no prepared speech. He looked around slowly, his gaze sweeping over each face. Then he said, "I didn't call the whiskey team for applause. I called because I needed to be reminded that there was a time when people didn't leave each other behind. Not a sound. Just quiet breathing and a few reddened eyes." Frank glanced at the front row where Jesse Ray sat, head bowed. "I'm not angry at anyone. I just hope that when someone else falls, someone will step forward. Not to fight, just not to stand still." After the ceremony, the bikers stayed. No one made them. They chose to. Tynox approached Frank, removed his sunglasses, bowed his head. I have no excuse, but if you'll allow it, I'd like to make things right, starting by volunteering at local veteran events. Frank nodded. He said nothing, but his eyes forgave. Days later, the town erected a modest monument in the park, etched in stone. Honor never fades. Respect those who served. Masant, the teen who had filmed everything, brought a bouquet of flowers. He laid it at the statue's base, whispered, My dad was a soldier too. And I know, real heroes don't always wear armor. Frank didn't need praise. He only needed to know that in a world forgetting too quickly, someone still remembered. Remembered those who gave. Remembered that freedom isn't a gift. It's a price paid in blood, sweat, and silent old age. This story isn't meant to make you cry. It's meant to ask you something. If you saw a veteran being wronged, what would you do? Justice for veterans isn't just a name. It's a vow that even if they grow old, even if they grow frail, their honor never fades. If you believe in this, to share the story. Don't let a hero stand alone.